Hello, friends. This is Darkstream coming at you from the PTR, testing out the RET changes. So, there's a lot going on with this new talent tree. Blizzard listened. I don't know how else to say it. They listened to, gosh, it feels like every complaint that the Paladin community gave them. They really took it all into consideration, and there's a lot of changes: survivability, mobility, utility, and even damage, which I don't feel like was Ret Paladin's issue, right? Maybe single target, but in terms of cleave, we were doing just fine. But there's a lot more cleave in this talent tree as well. It's pretty crazy. So what I thought I would do is I've gone ahead and posted my feedback to the PTR, talking about every single talent. I wanted to share some of those points here as well to kind of give people a preview to how it's actually going on the PTR. I've seen a lot of videos covering these topics, but they're generally coming from people who say they're not experienced with RET, they haven't followed RET. The thing is, those people follow the flavor of the month classes, which means they haven't paid attention to RET in like 3 expansions, right? So, it may benefit you to hear the opinion of someone who's stuck with the class for 20 years. That said, I'm happy. Overall, I'm really pretty happy. Compared to the Dragonflight initial talents, what they've built here is so much better and addresses almost all the feedback I gave in beta. Not only did they change the spec tree, but they changed the class tree a bunch too. So let's go through some of these changes. First thing I noticed is cleanse. Used to be down here. They moved it up a row, which totally changes how accessible it is. Now, if you're prot or holy, you could get cleanse a lot easier than Ret could. Ret did not want to go down the side too much, but if I had lay on hands, I could pick it up. Fist of Justice. Now, this talent used to be on the right side, and it was a little more accessible. I felt a little awkward trying to get this because it forced me to take Blinding Light for Repentance, which I might not take all the time. But Fist of Justice is really powerful, so you still kind of have to lean into it, and it feels fine. It makes more sense that you have to go through a crowd control node to get it. Turn Evil was moved up, and Obduracy was moved up as well, and this gives us some options. The top gate of the class tree really lacked nodes before, and it was all kind of bottom heavy, so you didn't have a lot of choice, whereas now I can see myself moving points around. Finally, for Ret, they gave Blessing of Freedom for free. So this is just an extra talent point that you get to spend on your class tree now. Now there is something I don't like, and it's the auras, right? I'm still not happy with how auras work. I'm not thrilled about this new Retribution aura. So what they've done is they've removed Seraphim, the active ability, as well as all of the random procs, and that includes the one from Retribution aura. What they've replaced it with is a proc that buffs the whole raid 5% extra damage and healing for 10 seconds out of every 30 seconds. Why isn't this just a flat buff? Like, I don't understand their obsession with a proc, and they want to make Retribution aura happen. They're really fixated on the definition of the word retribution, right? It has to be in reaction to something. It has to be punishing something. Honestly, they should just throw this idea away. If they want to give Ret a buff, it should be in the spec tree, because right now, it's gonna look like Holy Paladins are the ones who would push Retribution aura, right? I've even heard people say, well, they value the increased healing and damage more than the 3% damage reduction on the raid. This is wrong. Very, very wrong. I know people are very damage obsessed. However, damage reduction is so important. You might not think that 3% adds up to much, but if it did, if you could see the amount of damage saved on a damage meter, on a healing meter, Paladins would be the top healers, guaranteed. So that's the only thing I don't like about the first gate. Overall, I rated the first gate 4.5 out of 5. I said it was largely improved. The only part I don't like is the auras, and that's really more their design than the positioning tree. Suggestions I had was maybe there could be more nodes in the first gate. Maybe you could put another one um, similar to the position of turn evil, or maybe you could put another one in the third row off to the side in the position Cleanse Toxins used to occupy, and that would really flesh it out. But I don't have any suggestions for what those talents would be, right? There's not anything coming to mind that needs to be there. All right, moving on to the second gate of the class tree. That's this middle portion here. A lot changed. So Divine Steed is, well, it's sort of off the global cooldown, as you can see. If you cast another ability, it still gets global cooldown. So, not sure if this is a bug or just a creative implementation, but I would say right now, this doesn't solve the paladin mobility issue. What does help is that the extra second was added to Seasoned Warhorse. So you get 6 seconds on your horse now, as opposed to, I believe you get like 4.5 in retail right now. It's not great. They also took away the optional talent that was here that nobody took. It's been baked into Crusader Aura naturally now, so if you use Crusader Aura, you get a little bit of extra range on your abilities, which not huge, but it's not nothing, right? It's not nothing. Light Forged Blessing. So this is at the bottom of the second gate here. This, basically, Divine Storm used to do something like this before, right? You'd press Divine Storm and it would heal the nearest X allies. This says 0 allies, so it sounds like they haven't quite figured out how that's going to work yet. I do have a major problem with this being in the class tree, though. Holy and Prot do not get Divine Storm. So why is this here and not in the spec tree? I just don't understand why they did this. So, yeah, I'm sure that'll change, but it really doesn't make any sense that this talent exists for Prot and Holy. Next one I want to look at is Sanctified Plates. So this talent, for 1 point, looks so ridiculous, right? Look at how much power you're getting for 1 talent point. However, this is totally appropriate to the amount that paladins were dying, at least ret paladins. This might be a little strong for Prot and Holy, but maybe not, because I don't think they're meta either, right? I don't think any paladin spec is currently the best at anything. So while this seems kind of overpowered, I think it acts as a good tuning knob. If Paladin is ever too survivable, they can turn this down. If Paladin's ever not survivable enough, they can turn this up. Seems like a really easy tuning knob for the developer. Next up, we have Rebuke. Now, for me, this feels just the same, as easy to access as it was before. My understanding is Prot and Holy get it a little easier now, so that's nice. What's also nice is Punishment. Successfully interrupting an enemy with Rebuke casts an extra Crusader Strike. So this is the next level of rewarding interrupts. Lots of classes were rewarded resources for doing an interrupt, and I actually made this suggestion in Alpha and Beta that Rebuke should reward a Holy Power. What it's doing, though, is casting an extra Crusader Strike, which is not the same thing. We'll go over quite a bit more in the ret tree, but Crusader Strike is a very different ability now, right? It deals a lot more damage, it crits more often, it doesn't proc any buffs, but it resets the cooldowns on other stuff. So you end up getting quite a lot out of that extra Crusader Strike. Now, this is one of my absolute most important favorite talents that they've added is Crusader's Reprieve. Crusader Strike and auto attack range increased by 3 yards. This, combined with some of the other abilities that we have in both trees, actually puts ret in that 8-yard range melee category. I've talked about this a lot. I think it's really important, especially if the design goal is still going to be that ret, they're improving the mobility, but They're not making it like rogues, is what they said, right? So that means we're not going to be the most mobile class. What makes sense for a class like that, then, is having an increased reach, an increased range, so that they can take positions that help them. That extra 3 yards lets you stand behind the melee pile. And what's great about this, Rot and Holy also get this. So that'll be really nice, especially on encounters where it's tough for melee. Maybe you can't have too many people in melee because there's AoE or anything else. And the nice thing about it is the 2% maximum health heal. That's kind of like Bloodthirst from Fury Warriors, right? It's not a lot of health, but it's just like a small sustaining heal. And that is why this is one of my favorite talents they've added, because I think it's, even though it doesn't look crazy, it's going to change a lot. So overall, I rated the second gate also 4.5 out of 5. In Dragonflight, I rated that a 4. The second gate of the class tree was one of the better areas in the original beta release talent tree. Moving on to the third gate, I would like to talk about Strength of Conviction and how it does nothing for Ret Paladins, and that's weird. I don't understand why they didn't just put a Ret ability here, but I understand that they are trying to reduce the impact of stacking modifiers, and that is a good thing. Still, would it kill them to put Templar's Verdict on this, or maybe even just Justicar's Vengeance, or something so that it has some play with Ret? Not the most important thing in the world, just an idea I want to put out there. Next, I want to take a look at these seal talents. So I've been very critical of these because I think a talent that just gives you 2% stats is worthless. It's filler, it's sawdust in the applesauce, right? It's taking up a spot where an interesting idea could actually be, and it contributes to the stacking modifiers problem, right? Ret ends up with some weird scaling that ends up creating nasty burst. So they've actually buffed these talents. They give more, a lot more than they used to. 4% mastery, 4% strength, and this one's 4% haste and judgment cooldown reduced by a minute. So that's okay, right? That's a little more interesting. I still don't like these talents, and I still resent the fact that they call them seal when they are not seals. A seal of something is a specific ability from Warcraft's past. I don't like them reusing the word without actually embracing the concept. One spot where they did embrace the concept is this one, Seal of the Crusader. Your auto attacks deal extra holy damage. This used to be a proc that increased the amount of holy damage the target took, but it was random, so you couldn't really play around it, you never really thought about it. This is effectively the same thing, but it makes more sense. And it actually kind of matches what Seal of spells are supposed to be, although Seal of the Crusader was not the seal that gave extra holy damage. It increased your attack speed, and judging it increased the holy damage that the target took. Really, this is more like Seal of the Righteous. It deals additional holy damage every time. Okay, one little miss. For each holy power you spend has a 5% chance to cause your consecration to flare up. We're going to have to jump to the spec tree, but you can see that we get a spell called Divine Hammer, which replaces Consecration, or Consecrated Blade if you've taken it. So this talent, Incandescence, needs to have an interaction added with Divine Hammers. It should do the same thing if you have Divine Hammers up. Now, there's a big change to the tree where they dropped Divine Toll in the middle and got rid of Seraphim. And I think everyone loves this. There's not much to say about it. It was actually kind of weird because Divine Toll was in all 3 Paladin spec trees. Yeah. So there's this thing where we said the Paladin class and spec trees weren't finished, and this proves that to be true. Why the heck would you put this ability 3 different times in 3 different spec trees when it clearly makes sense as the middle capstone? Honestly, Divine Toll is one of the most iconic abilities for Paladins from Shadowlands. It actually fit the class fantasy. I don't love the concept of covenants, but I think we're all happy to carry forward some of these abilities. Divine Toll is one of them. Glad to have it. They also added a different option. So if you don't like Divine Resonance, you could take Divine Toll Quicken Invocation to have it on a 45-second cooldown. I'm not sure of any build that needs a 45-second cooldown now that Seraphim's gone, but there it is. Now, the last big change in the third gate was, of course, Of Dusk and Dawn. So they've reworked this ability to change how it works. How it previously worked was you would cap up to 5 holy power, and then you would spend down to 0 holy power. 5 gives you Dawn, 0 gives you Dusk, and you would have to rotate through that like a maintenance buff. Unpopular opinion, I like maintenance buffs. They reward skilled players, and people who say, I don't like it, it's annoying, that's because they're not skilled players. They let the buff drop off and do worse, and they don't want to do worse. They just want to be guaranteed good. I don't believe in guaranteed good. I want a class that requires good gameplay in order to perform well. So let's read the new Of Dusk and Dawn. When you cast 3 holy power generating abilities, you gain Dawn. When you consume Dawn, you gain Dusk. How do you consume Dawn? You use a holy power spending ability. So this makes this entirely passive. You're never going to think about it. It's just there. For me, this is obviously a worse design, right? I don't think we needed that level of management removed from the class. I do think it kind of dumbs it down. Another weird thing about this is the Blessing of Dawn stacks. 3 holy power abilities will gain you 3 to 5 holy power. Why would you stack this? Why would you keep pressing your generators when you have 5 holy power already? I don't know how far this stacks either. It doesn't say. Does it stack infinitely? That's certainly not going to be a PvE strategy, but it just seems weird, counterintuitive. I don't like it. The new Blessing of Dusk. So now we have this option, right? We have our Seal of Order, which was already there, works the same. We also now have a talent called Fading Light. Fading Light provides the same Blessing of Dawn benefit, but it changes the Blessing of Dusk benefit so that your generators, that's Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, and so on, generate an absorb shield for 20% of the damage or healing dealt. This is really cool and really powerful, I think, but the problem is it's being lined up against something that cools down your abilities faster. So to take this, you are giving up DPS. So I feel like that might not be a realistic option, at least for Ret Paladins, but maybe it's not there for Ret Paladins, right? I think that version of Blessing of Dusk could be useful to Prot and Holy, although in some regards I still think they'd want the cooldown reduction and the armor as well for Prot. Armor is going to be way more damage reduction than this crappy absorb. So I don't like the Dusk of Dawn rework. I know that they received a lot of feedback from people who don't like the current version. I like the current version better than this. I think it's too simple. I think you're not interacting with it anymore. It's become entirely passive. You don't have to think about it or know how it works. I think that's a bad design. Overall, I rated the third gate 4 out of 5. It was the worst rating of the class tree. With that, that's the class tree. Let's take a look at the spec tree, though. Look at this. Beautiful work of art. So one of the problems that we had before was there was not a lot of nodes, but there also wasn't a lot of choice. You really didn't have a lot of options to choose from as Ret. There were like 2 builds that used 95% of the same talents and changed 2 or 3 talents for cleave or AoE, right? It's not good. Secondly, there wasn't any logic to how the tree was laid out before. It's not like cleave was on the left and single target was on the right, or it's not like certain abilities had a flavor, like I don't know. Well, we're gonna see what here, because what they've done is the left side is now more of a crusader theme, right? So you are going into something called Holy Strike damage, which is a combination of holy and physical and should use the better of either resistance or immunity when attacking a target. You're also going to be buffing your physical damage. From my testing, this appears to be kind of just like better at single target, this build is. On the right side, though, you have fire damage. And this is more of that Ashbringer vibe, right? You've got your Wake of Ashes, your Consecrates, your Expurgations, your Blade of Justice throwing your Consecrates, your Blade of Justice hitting multiple targets, putting a dot on them. This doesn't seem quite finished, though. So what it does is you go into Radiant damage. That's cool, but there's not a lot of ways to get Radiant damage. So people are saying, hey, where did Exorcism go? Maybe Exorcism would fit with this part of the tree. I'd agree with that. People are saying, there's not enough fire damage abilities, so it doesn't feel worth it. Numerically, it probably is just because of Wake of Ashes and how powerful it is, but it would be nice if we could be like, yeah, my Crusader Strike does radiant damage now, or whatever. So let's take a look at how this actually worked out with these two themes, left and right, Crusader and Ashbringer. So looking at the first gate, we have our default pick, we have our default pick, we have our default pick. But then we get to these nodes, and what you find is the first gate is actually 3 default picks and then 6 choice nodes. So there's actually 12 talents here, but it doesn't screw up your pathing since they're combined into a choice node. And how they've done this is you can either lean into Crusader Strike and Judgment, or you can lean into Blade of Justice. You have the same thing on this side. 2 charges of Crusader Strike, 2 charges of Blade of Justice. This is interesting in theory, but in reality, everyone's taking Crusading Strikes. So we don't even click Crusader Strike anymore. It's not an ability. You can play base Crusader Strike, and you can play Blessed Hammers as well, but personally, I think this choice, it's not well thought out, not well balanced. I feel like you're always just going to pick the Blade of Justice ones. Now the next one, what a brilliant choice. I feel completely the opposite about this. So first of all, Final Verdict used to be a capstone. Now it's up here in Gate 1. Whoa. It's paired against Justicar's Verdict. So you have a choice of 2 things that increase your damage. Now, it looks like Justicar's is lower damage, but it's not really, because Justicar's Vengeance is going to benefit from the physical presence and all the other talents down here. So that's another amazing thing. Justicar's Vengeance was a PvP talent that got copy-pasted into the tree. It had no synergy with anything. No talents looked at it. It didn't combine with anything. It was kind of out of the way. Now it's in a completely accessible place, and I can see reasons where you might want to use either of these, right? Final Verdict is very comfortable. It gives you that range on your finishers. And that's we were talking about that earlier with the Crusader's Reprieve talent. If you are a class with lower mobility, increased range helps solve that problem, because, well, it doesn't matter if you're up in 5-yard melee range. The next one, this is a survivability talent. You can either have a instant cast Flash of Light, or you can have a free Word of Glory that's automatic and doesn't incur a global cooldown. So obviously Light's celerity would give you more healing overall over time, but if you're a Ret Paladin, you're probably not wanting to heal more over time, but it lets you control it, and you can cast it on someone else. Whereas Guided Prayer is a very selfish survivability tool. So I think this is a good choice. Now, here we have Healing Hands and Unbound Freedom. I know that PvP-oriented players hate that this is a choice node. But for me, I think this is a brilliant choice node, because increased movement on Blessing of Freedom increases your survivability, and Healing Hands increases your survivability. This is a really interesting utility. I can see reasons to use both. On the other hand, I always go for mobility because, well, that's what Ret really needs, so I wouldn't be able to take Healing Hands. And I do Word of Glory a lot. Hopefully, though, with this rework, I won't need to Word of Glory anymore. That's one of the things about Ret Paladins. When you get into high content, you're just going to heal yourself. You just are. You have to. The healers can't keep up with you. And that feels real bad. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Tentatively, I really like this as a choice node. Next up, we have Righteous Cause and Art of War. I don't know that Righteous Cause can be good enough because there's so much attack speed that Rhett gets. They swing really fast with some of these talents. So having the extra procs come out of this one sometimes does feel like too much resources, but why would you choose something that produces less, right? All right, and with that, we've covered the first gate. I rated this first gate 4.5 out of 5. The old version I rated, I believe my review I gave it a 3 out of 5. Old Gate had pretty much no choice, so this is a massive upgrade, and there's a lot of gameplay to think about here, right? These are all foundational choices that will change how you play. I really like that. I think that's what talent trees are supposed to be about. All right, let's move on to the second gate. So here we get a little more pathing and single node talents. There's a lot to look at here. So jurisdiction, this is what gives you increased range on Final Verdict, Blade of Justice. You combine that with your Crusader's Reprieve, maybe your Crusader Aura, and Red Paladin is now like a mid-range DPS. That's pretty cool. You still can't hit your auto attacks. Your auto attacks will be at 8 yards, so obviously you're not going to be standing at 20 yards the whole time. But what this is great for is continuing your rotation as you're running out from a boss ability, right? This is one of the best things about Ret Paladin. You know, the boss goes, oh, it's a circle, run away, run out of the circle. And as you're running out, you hit him with a Blade of Justice, you hit him with a Judgment, you hit him with a Final Verdict, you throw your Hammer of Wrath, you hit him with another Blade of Justice, and then the AoE is over, you're back in melee, and your rotation didn't stop. That's cool. And I think that's kind of the flavor they're going for here. Judgment of Justice, another banger. So I cannot believe that they did this. This is a combination of the old Judgment of Justice, which slowed enemies. You judge your seal of justice on someone, and it different versions. Sometimes it slowed them, sometimes it limited their movement speed to 100%, meaning they couldn't speed boost away from you. And this also combines an element of Long Arm of the Law, which was another older talent we've talked about before on this channel, where casting a judgment would give you a speed boost. In some iterations, that meant the target had to be far away. So eventually, they took that away because the way hitboxes work, even in melee range, the judgment would target the head of the boss, and that would create the distance required to generate the proc. So, simplifying it, it's all been combined into one thing. It's a really nice talent, actually, both for PvE and PvP. I really like that they didn't overdo it on the movement speed either. 10% is nice, but you're not going to be able to take this talent and use it as your only mobility option, right? It's just a nice little boost. It kind of makes Judgment a gap closer. So, and that feeling always felt good back in Cataclysm when I was world ranked raider. Judgment of Justice was part of my strategy as Ret to get around. We still have our Empyrean Power, that hasn't changed, just moved positions. Still have our Shield of Vengeance, that hasn't changed, except one thing's missing here, right? What's missing? Divine Protection is now just a baseline ability, so you no longer have to choose between those two. You just get Divine Protection and you just get Shield of Vengeance. I can cast Divine Shield, Divine Protection, and Shield of Vengeance all at once. I have 3 bubbles right now. So that's good, and that will largely solve the Retribution survivability problems, I think, especially in combination with this talent here, which is in the third gate, but since it's connected, we'll cover it, increases the damage reduction of Divine Protection and increases the Absorb Shield of Shield of Vengeance both. That's just a real nice survivability boost. As well, 2% versatility, that's 1% less damage taken, that helps too. Okay, moving on to the right side here. So this is a new one, and this is an old one. We have Tempest of the Lightbringer, where, it makes that line. Inquisitor's Ire, though. So this is a really interesting talent. You can see I've got it stacked up here. The next Divine Storm deals 50% increased damage. So every 3 seconds, you get a stack of the buff. Basically, this means you throw out a Divine Storm, and it's dealing it's still not quite as much as your single target abilities, but you use that in combination with your Empyrean Legacy, which makes Divine Storm just happen when you cast a Templar Verdict. So what this does effectively is gives you a nice big Divine Storm that you just get as part of your single target rotation for free. And if there is an encounter where you know there's like ads that are going to spawn, you can kind of work around this to use your Inquisitor's Ire to get a big burst of damage. Now, going over here, we have Expurgation, got a change. It used to only occur on crits, now it just always happens, so now Expurgation is back to being an amazing, amazing ability. It also ties in with the rest of the Ashbringer themed talents below. Zealot's Fervor. So this is a really smart talent they've created. There were like a few talents, I think 4 different talents in the Ret tree that increased either melee attack speed or haste. So what they did, they kind of consolidated all those down into just one simple talent, 20% auto attack speed. That's great. Over here we have Consecrated Ground, same talent as it was. I do notice they removed the other version. I don't remember what it was called, but it basically was like a Blessing of Freedom in your consecration. I don't think a lot of people were using that, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Now down here we have another option against Empyrean Legacy. If you were going for a true AoE build, you are gonna take Blade of Vengeance, which makes Blade of Justice an AoE. It is one of the most ridiculous things that you will ever see. Let me go ahead, well, we'll take a look at some abilities after, but I think this, combined with Commanding Judgments, which makes your Judgments hit 5 targets, I don't know how much of that is going to make it to live, but it's very fun. We still have Sanctify, however, notice the numbers gone down. So Sanctify received a massive nerf, and this is their getting Consecration out of Ret. Right now, Ret Paladin, if you're especially in dungeons, but sometimes in raids as well, it's a multi-target situation, Consecration will end up being one of your top damaging abilities. This Sanctify talent is the reason, because what you do is you use your Empyrean Legacy for the proc, even on a single target, and in AoE, you would just be spamming Divine Storm, so everyone takes double damage from Consecrate, and you also have like triple, quadruple Consecrations going on. With that damage bonus nerfed, Consecration's much lower, and I think a lot of people will be happy with this. However, what I'm not happy with is the new Consecrated Blade. So this used to let you guaranteed place a Consecration using your Art of War proc. Now it's a 40% chance. To me, this talent is so irritating. If I want a Consecration down, I don't want to deal with RNG, right? I don't want that. Make it so my Blade of Justice just puts down a Consecration on the target, and that would be a perfectly fine talent. 40% chance is just, I don't know what it is with them and about procs and RNG, especially with Paladin, but this needs to go. But you can also choose Divine Hammers. So this was an ability from Legion. It's basically just Immolation Aura. It works the same way as Immolation Aura for Demon Hunters. It does have an interesting interaction with Sanctify, though, because now if you have your Empyrean Legacy go off, proccing that free Divine Storm, your target will now be debuffed with Sanctify, which means that's the time you're gonna press Divine Hammer. And it's a 20-second cooldown, so not sure, haven't simmed to see what exactly the best process with that would be, but my thinking is you would want to use Divine Hammer right after your Empyrean Legacy goes off. Okay, jumping back over to the left side here, let's take a look. We have Improved Judgment versus Boundless Judgment. Now, I think this is a cool talent because it does really change what you're doing with your Judgment, but I feel like I have too much Holy Power already, so I don't feel like one additional Holy Power is valuable. And also, you can end up running out of abilities. Depending how you build this tree, there's a lot of different ways where you can really simplify out a lot of stuff and end up with like a 4-button class. And if you don't have enough charges on those 4 buttons, you will now have dead GCDs idling time, and that's not good. Alright, now this is probably the most well-known, the most exciting, the most important change, which is Ret Paladin got one of these replacing auto attack talents. Warriors have this, Demon Hunters have this. Basically, what this does is takes a button off your bar. It is now just part of your auto attack. It's important to note that I tested this. If you're standing on a target dummy just auto attacking with this, and then you compare that to just auto attacking and using a 2-charge Crusader Strike on cooldown, the basic regular Crusader Strike will generate more DPS. However, in the real rotation, you don't have this frees up so much room in your global cooldowns to do other stuff that it's a massive DPS increase. It's paired against Blessed Hammers, which is severely undertuned right now. I was testing it out on the Cleave dummies, and it actually dealt less damage than Crusader Strike did. Single target Crusader Strike did on the Cleave dummies, so I don't think this ability is very good. I think they copy-pasted it right from Fraught without doing any adjustments for Ret. Now, we have another Crusader Strike talent here, and it's interesting, they're clearly aware that Crusader Strike and auto attacks are associated, so a lot of these talents affect both, and this says auto attacks and Crusader Strike deal more damage and crit more often. Not that exciting, but this path of the talent tree starts to lean into critical strike chance more, which is a bit different than Ret had previously played. You pretty much always go haste mastery at this point. Maybe some of the talents on this left side will open up critical-oriented builds, or at least change the stat weights a bit. Now this is another incredible talent. Crusader Strike hits 2 additional targets, and there's 2 ranks, so it's 4 additional targets. So you can auto-attack and hit 5 targets. Now this doesn't generate extra holy power, it doesn't proc the heal multiple times, so you're not getting any ridiculous scaling there, but gosh, it's nice. To auto-attack your Crusader Strikes from 8-yard range and hit 5 targets, this is not the same class anymore, right? It's totally changed. And of course, we still have Crusade versus Avenging Wrath Might. As it stands right now, they were experimenting with Might being a 1-minute cooldown, but it's back to a 2-minute cooldown. I don't see a lot of reasons to use Might outside of PvP, and I don't see a lot of reasons to use Crusade outside of PvE. I think this is a problem. There should be reasons to use either in either form of content. It shouldn't be like this, but I don't feel like they've solved the problem yet. So all in all, I ended up giving the second gate of the spec tree a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy that there's a clear, like, Crusader path on the left and Ashbringer path on the right. I think a lot of the talent moves make sense as well, like how the Divine Storm buffing talents are, like, closer together. The Blade of Justice buffing talents are closer together. There's much more thought put into the layout. However, I did have quite a few complaints, right? There's a few things that aren't quite finished, aren't quite working, don't quite make sense. And honestly, there's a lot in this part of the talent tree that it's kind of overpowered, right? It's kind of crazy. I'm not sure all of this will make it live. Let's move on to the third gate here, starting off with education. So this is what I was talking about with the crit oriented build. We're getting more talents that give crit chance, and crit damage. Crit damage is what can actually really affect your stat weights for the crit stat. Because unfortunately, the nature of critical strike chance is the more you have, the less valuable it is. It has a natural diminishing returns, even before Blizzard applies the diminishing returns on critical strike rating, right? Just thinking about it, if you crit 1% of the time, you're dealing 1% more damage. If you crit 2% of the time, that's slightly less than 1% more damage, and so on and so forth. Moving down, this education talent leans into, okay, now we're seeing a Hammer of Wrath oriented build. You get 3 charges of Hammer of Wrath, which is really sick. It feels good to just Hammer of Wrath, Hammer of Wrath, Hammer of Wrath. It gives it a purpose during execute range again, which is nice, right? So generating extra holy power. Now again, this build specifically with Crusading Strikes does not have resource problems. In fact, I think it has too much resources. We really feel flooded with holy power right now. So it's not the most important thing, but it does lean into a changed rotation that starts to happen depending on what build you get. Blades of Light. Now I love this talent because this starts to show what they're thinking with the Crusader build versus the Ashbringer build, right? The Crusader build does Holy Strike damage. It kind of lets you put your mastery on all of your physical damage abilities by making them also holy damage. However, it turns your holy damage abilities into abilities that are affected by armor because they're now physical. So there's a give and take there. The weird part is this doesn't affect Blade of Justice, even though it's called Blades of Light. If you want your Blade of Justice to be Holy Strike, you have to go all the way to the other side of the tree. So that's a little weird, and I think maybe these talents could be combined. And then at the bottom, we have Physical Presence, which is kind of boring at 20% physical damage. But there's been in the blue post, they said this isn't finished yet. It'll have additional functionality in the coming updates. So maybe this isn't what it'll be at the end. Still, if you test out this build in particular, going down this tree, I found this to be the highest single target build that I practiced. And I think there's really some opportunity there to create a play style that's different. And that's really what Ret lacked, is having buttons feel different, pressing your buttons in a different order on different builds, right? Every build felt the same. Not anymore. All right, moving down the middle gate. So we already talked about Crusade and Might. We already talked about Aegis of Protection. We have this new talent called High Lord's Judgment. This is a real interesting one. You can take 2 ranks. So your judgment normally gets consumed by a finisher. This lets it last 2 finishers or even 3 finishers. It's very powerful. It also is nice because what that does is if you have High Lord's Judgment, then maybe you can take Boundless Judgment. And instead of having 2 charges of Judgment, you don't need that because your judgments last for multiple finishers. And it's one bug I found with this is, and I hope this is a bug, but Tempest of the Lightbringer casts a second ability called Divine Storm, and unfortunately that 20% small Divine Storm copy will also consume a charge of Judgment. That kind of sucks. Alright, so here we have a choice between Final Reckoning and Execution Sentence. I'm happy to see this. I know a lot of people liked using these together, but that is the problem that Blizzard was trying to solve, right? Stacking holy damage modifiers, insane burst, and then hitting like a wet noodle outside of the burst window. That was a problem for the class. I was worried they would have to remove one of these abilities, but instead, they've put them against each other. So by forcing you to choose one, you can't have both. You can't do that wombo combo that everyone's doing in PvP right now. The talents below it are interesting because they affect both abilities in the same way. So the Extending Execution Sentence, Executioner's Will talent now also applies to Final Verdict. That's actually really cool, right? So you can Final Verdict into your Final Reckoning and keep that going. It doesn't work in AoE, but still, it's a nice option. And then this one, Divine Auxiliary, making these abilities generate free holy power. So if you're familiar with how Ret does things, usually you pool up to 5 holy power before you activate these abilities, so you can get right to spending your finishers and capitalize on the bonus damage. In theory, this lets you be a little more flexible with your rotation in PvE, but PvE, it still feels like we have way too much holy power, so I don't see why you would take this. PvP, however, you're often out of range of your targets. This could be a real benefit to pull 5 holy power, or pull 3 holy power out of a hat. Alright, now we can see here's Wake of Ashes, and it's down to a 30-second cooldown. The talent that reset its cooldown as a proc is gone. So is Radiant Decree. I'm so sad. I'm actually going to do this on this video right now. Please bring back Radiant Decree as a talent choice with this node. Listen, I get that it might be hard to balance a 3 holy power generator that turns into a 3 holy power finisher, but figure it out. Radiant Decree was one of my favorite things in Dragonflight for Ret Paladin, and there wasn't a lot to be excited about for Ret Paladins, right? And we're in a position now where it really feels like, especially during AoE, I have like infinity holy power, but I just press Divine Storm over and 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 over again. And that's not fun, that's lame. I like having different abilities, different buttons to do different things. I liked having Radiant Decree as a spender, and I need it back. Now, below it we have a talent called Seething Flames, which the tooltip is broken, but basically when you cast Wake of Ashes, it like triple casts. I don't know where this idea comes from or why it's here. It doesn't even seem to do a lot of damage, honestly, compared to Truth's Wake, which is amazing! We already have Truth's Wake, but basically it puts a big dot, a big radiant damage dot, which is radiant damage is holy and fire. That'll be relevant in a minute. And moving on to the part of the tree that makes it relevant, we have Swift Retribution. I hate this talent. I've talked about this already. I think talents that are just giving 2% stats are a waste. They show the developer didn't have any good ideas. Now, what they've done is just tacked on some additional cooldown reduction. Again, I feel flooded with resources. I feel like I have so much holy power, and I have 2 buttons on which I can spend my holy power, and it's not very exciting. So, not a big fan of this one. However, I love this talent. Although I do think it can be combined with Blades of Light in some way. So basically, Holy Crusader or Burning Crusade will change your Blade of Justice and your Expurgation proc to either be Holy Strike, which is physical and holy, or Radiant, which is fire and holy. The capstone of this tree is increased fire damage as well, increased damage from your periodic effects. That's your dots. So that means your Expurgation gets buffed, that means your Truth's Wake gets buffed, that means your Consecration or your Divine Hammers should get buffed. I don't think they actually are being buffed by this talent yet, though. Interestingly, this doesn't say whether it affects tier equipment stuff. Now, usually talents don't. However, there's a lot in this tier that actually is periodic fire damage, right? It almost seems like potentially there could be a need to go this way if you had certain equipment. I don't think that's what Blizzard wants to do, though, so I don't expect that to be the live version of what we get here. Now, they've also commented Searing Light is another talent where it's not finished. Additional functionality will be added. They kind of just stuck those on the top to finish things up while they continue their work. I would say the fire side of the tree is more oriented towards AoE damage, and I would also say it's lacking something, because right now there's not a lot of periodic effects for you to increase, so hopefully they come up with some interesting mechanic to put in as a capstone here. My one thought, though, would be that I think this Holy Crusade, Burning Crusade, and this Blades of Light talent, these should be combined, right? And so we should get one that says Crusader Strike, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, Blade of Justice, Expurgation now deals Holy Strike. And then we should have that same talent change all of those things to Radiant. I think that would make a lot of sense. It could even affect Consecration and Divine Hammers, to be honest. I think the elemental theming is strong, and if I were going to put that talent somewhere, it might fit here right in the middle of the tree, maybe bump High Lords to the side and stick it right there beside it. Now, I have set up a few different builds, and you can see the training dummy area is basically like the Paladin class order hall at this point. We're going crazy. It's all red all day long. Look at all these red pallies. We got Blood Elf, we got Blood Elf, we got Zandalari Troll, we got another human, a Tauren, another Blood Elf. Lots of Paladin action going on. So let's take a look at a couple of the builds I've done. So this is one of my lower testing builds. It's it's trying to do single target with the fire periodic build, and it does okay, but it's not as good as the Holy Strike build. So what I thought I would do, I'll start off, and you can see that extra range coming into play, and you can see that's a Crusader Strike that's happening. Now, it gets a little funky when I put wings up and start having all our cooldowns, right? Let's take a look at what this does. So Final Verdict gives you Hammers of Wrath and Blades of Justice if you have that other talent. So you can end up in a situation where we're being a 3 or 4 button class right now, and it also sometimes feels like it's hard to find a spot for Wake of Ashes and Divine Toll. They are higher damage abilities, so you're going to want to press them, but pressing either Wake of Ashes or Divine Toll is pretty much guaranteed wasting Holy Power. You're going to overfill your bar. And as you see, my Holy Power it's actually pretty hard to keep down at this point. Now, I'll continue through, maybe we'll fast forward this part. Let's see what the damage looks like after 2 minutes. Alright, that's 2 minutes. So the damage is ticking down now, but around 55k. Single target with no buffs. Not bad, but we can do better, right? Let's try a different single target build. Making some minor adjustments here, because I was testing some stuff out. So, I called this the Crusader build, right? We're going with full Crusade, Hammer of Wraths with lots of charges, full Holy Strike damage. We are a physical damage beast. So let's see how it does. So you'll notice with this rotation, we cast one Judgment. We start to run into a situation where you're going to extend Crusade a long time, which is fun. But you can see I'm having trouble actually managing my Holy Power, and sometimes, even with just the 2 Judgments, I'm not consuming the debuff effectively, right? Like, I'm reapplying Judgment before my next finisher. So it'll take a little practice. One thing you'll notice there, the Tempest with Lightbringer proc just devoured my... The Imperial Legacy proc just devoured both my Judgment buffs, so that's something to be aware of. Alright, let's fast forward this and see where the DPS lands. Alright, DPS is counting down a little, but that was sustaining around 67k. So you can see what I mean by maybe these aren't quite tuned and balanced to each other yet. This was a build with no Wake of Ashes. This was a 4-button build. That's pretty crazy, right? Okay, let's try a different one. Okay, so this one we're going to have to switch off to the cleave dummies here. See people testing it out with their different hammers. So this build's going to use blessed hammers instead of crusading strikes. We've got the Commanding Justice, and we've got the Blade of Vengeance. So this is a very big Wake of Ashes, Divine Hammer, Final Reckoning, big cleaver build. Let's see how it plays. There's Divine Hammer. Don't love Divine Hammer. See the Judgment hitting all those targets? That's actually so sick. Blessed Hammer, though, I'm having a hard time finding it a place in the rotation. Like, do I just spam it out all the time? Is that how I'm supposed to do it? Why would I do that when I have a Judgment and a Blade of Justice that can hit that many more targets, right? So, alright, let's spam this out for 2 minutes and see where it lands. Alright, coming up on 2 minutes here, so that was doing about 150k, 145, 150k on AoE sustained. Now, let's change to one I've called Blade of Justice Cleave. So this is a bit of a different talent build. Okay? So we're still going into the Radiant spec with this, not the physical. And we're going into Cleaving Crusader Strikes. We've got Divine Hammer instead of Consecration. We're not using Sanctify because we're not using Empyrean Legacy. And you can see here, this build's real interesting because we don't need to put buttons on our bar anymore. So this is one of my concerns with what is happening on this rework, is they're really trying to refactor things, condense abilities that feel superfluous and have the same function. But what I'm finding is the highest DPS builds are the ones that only have like 3 or 4 buttons. So let's see how this works in compared to the last one, right? You can see we're starting to run into an issue where my holy power... Do you see what's happening here? Blade of Justice, Divine Storm. 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 Oh, I finally had to cast Judgment. Divine Storm. Blade of Justice, Divine Storm. Blade of Justice, Divine Storm. Blade of Justice, Divine Storm. This is a 2-button build that we've got right here. And my Judgment just gave me 3 holy power. This is ridiculous, right? Now look at the number, though. So this very simple ability, very simple build. Look at how much more damage it's doing. So I'll fast forward this. Let's see where we end up with. Okay, that's about 2 minutes. Number's going down now, but we were sustaining about 200k on these AoE targets. And I almost exclusively just pressed Blade of Justice and Divine Storm. So this extremely simple, mindless build is doing like 30% more damage than a build that has more buttons and more thought put into it. Maybe not the best situation, right? And that kind of shows you the blessed hammer problem, like why I don't have GCDs for that. I don't even have GCDs for Divine Hammer. I should honestly take it out of this build, because all I'm going to do is press Blade of Justice and 1 Judgment every once in a while so that I can triple finisher them. I don't need Wake of Ashes. That would be a waste of a GCD. All of that would be a waste. I only need one thing that does make this work, is the Final Reckoning. This talent doesn't actually work with Divine Storm, so I probably don't even need it, right? I could put this somewhere else. Probably Heart of the Crusader. Yep. That would have made my damage even higher. So, definitely weird. This Crusading Strikes talent, people are blaming this for the holy power generation, for everything being out of whack, but I don't know that this is the problem. What I think is the problem is the fact that we have so many talents that are giving these weird cooldown reductions, and so many talents that are doing these resets, right? Final Verdict resets abilities. And so what you end up with is too many buttons to press. But you didn't actually have that many buttons to begin with, so it's kind of a weird feeling, right? Now, these are just 4 random builds I've thrown together. The class tree pretty much stayed the same for all of them. I will note that I found this talent was actually increasing the cooldown of Judgment rather than reducing it, so I haven't been taking it. I think you probably would take this talent in retail once it works properly. Now, this is not to say that these are the builds, you know, my Bodge Cleave, my Hammers build, my How Now build, and a build I just called Ret. It's the Ashbringer build, right, all the fire damage. There's a lot more combinations you could do. I've done some with Execution Sentence, and that feels interesting. I've done some where I do the Holy Strike build, but I do take Wake of Ashes, and that feels interesting. So there's a lot going on, and unfortunately this will come down to, you know, someone's just going to have to sim out the best option, right? But in terms of playstyle, and outside of a patchwork fight on a target dummy, which is what a sim is, I think you really do have a lot of options and different feelings in the class, and I hope this video has showcased that. I do also think the Holy Power generation is gonna have to come out of somewhere. I hope they don't do something really stupid, like make Crusading Strikes a chance to generate Holy Power or something like that. We do not need proc chances. We do not need RNG, right? This is a class, Paladin's a class, that should basically never be forced to deal with RNG ever again, based on their history, right? We've had enough. Whatever's baked into the base game is fine with me. No more proc, chance for this, chance for that. We already have a bunch of this crap in the talent tree, too. And in fact, I think actually Article 4 might be the problem, because what if it's proccing twice on these auto-attacking Crusader strikes? That might be part of the issue, too. So there's just a lot going on with the talent tree. There's some incredible builds you can do. You could hone in, be a self-healing Justicar's Vengeance machine with fading light and lots of survivability. You can be a Blade of Justice fire damage cleaving machine with Wake of Ashes and Truth's Wake and periodic damage bonuses. Or you can be like a single target, take down the boss, physical damage Crusader build that basically just throws a lot of hammers of wrath. And that's not all. I'm sure there's other variations that are being discovered on the PTR right now by this Tauren Paladin, or maybe this Blood Elf Paladin. Warlock, what are you doing here? Get out of here. Paladin class hall. Yeah, that's right. Paladin. So, overall, it looks like this talent tree is getting about a rating out of 4 or 4.5 out of 5 for me. That's a score of 80 to 90%. The initial Dragonflight talent trees for Paladin, I rated around 3 out of 5, so like a 60% score. So that just gives you an idea of, at least for me, my opinion of how much they've improved the design of these trees. Now, I haven't focused too much on numbers because really that doesn't matter. They haven't done the tuning yet. So these numbers are going to go up and down. No one should get too excited about any damage number they see. But what I think is really important is to give Blizzard this type of feedback about what feels good, what feels bad, and what we'd like to see. So most of this content from the video I've actually already posted into the PTR forums, gave the developers that feedback. Still, I wanted to share it with the community as well. And as things develop, I'll continue covering it. Right now, at least, I would say this is a 10 out of 10 revamp. It's not finished, but what they have in is looking really good. Shows a really smart design philosophy that addressed a lot of the feedback the community was giving them. So, here's hoping it turns out well. Put your faith in the light. And with that, we've come to the end of at least this week's review of the PTR changes. Again, my name is Darkscream. If you enjoyed what you've watched here, go ahead, hit that like, that subscribe, so I pop up on your feed a little more often. Helps me out, helps you out too. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Peace.